so what I have in front of me is Google's latest flagship, their best ever flagship actually, the Pixel 9 Pro XL, and Apple's latest and greatest iPhone, the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now I've been using both of these phones as my daily, both phones have SIM cards in it, and I think it's time to let you guys know what I think what does what better and what you should maybe pick up if you're in the market for a brand new flagship phone. Now, I won't be comparing Gemini versus Apple Intelligence in this video, just because at the time of making this video, Apple Intelligence isn't technically out, but if you do want a video on that, let me know in the comments down below. So let's kick things off with its specs. Now, both of these phones are using their own in-house processors, with the 16 Pro Max using the A18 Pro chip, which is a class-leading processor beating out any of the latest processors from Qualcomm, MediaTek, and of course, Google's own Tensor chips. Its raw performance is out of this world and it's a beast at gaming. It's great for heavy intensive tasks, heavy demanding games, and if you want to edit 4K videos on this phone, you'll be able to do that with no problems. But yeah, it's a really impressive processor that's inside this 16 Pro Max. Now, the Pixel 9 Pro XL, on the other hand, is using the new Tensor G4 processor. And in terms of raw performance, it's fine, but not super fast like what the iPhone has. But it is efficient and does have all the AI and machine learning chops that Google's known for. Now, the Tensor G4 will still be able to run and multitask just fine, do some light gaming, and give you good performance day to day. But if you push it hard enough, it could lead to throttling. And if you're in an environment, where climate's a little bit too hot, this could potentially overheat. But also, I've noticed that these Tensor chips, depending on the game that you're playing, won't let you run the games at 60 frames per second, which I think is really odd because technically it should be able to handle most of the games on the Play Store at 60 frames per second. But yeah, optimization on Android is hard. Now, RAM management is different for both iOS and Android, so even though on paper the iPhone only has 8 gigs of RAM, it doesn't really need anything more than that. Although it would be nice to have more, but it's also not necessary. On Android with the Pixel 9 Pro XL, the more RAM the better, since there's a lot more things happening in the background, and with the way that Android operates and the thousands of different chipsets and phones that Android apps have to run on, it'll require more apps for those apps to operate somewhat similarly on other phones. Now, with the iPhone, there's only one chipset maker. There's only, a select amount of devices with identical screen sizes. So it's a lot easier to develop apps and have a more seamless experience from, one device to another. But yeah, trying to compare apples to Android is a little unfair since it's running different operating systems. Some people prefer Android in the Pixel experience with all the Google Gemini and, AI stuff it has. And some prefer the simplicity and straightforward look from iOS. But using everyday apps like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or even playing games, I really couldn't tell that much of a difference between these two phones. However, I know for a fact that social media apps are more optimized on iOS, but that's not really an iPhone 16 Pro Max thing, or is it a Pixel 9 Pro XL problem? It's just something that's been going on with iOS and Android the last few years. And while Android's getting very close to iOS when it comes to handling videos and photos on social media, it's unfortunately not on the same level yet. But everything else though, you're not gonna really notice a huge difference in how these two phones run apps on a daily basis, especially if you're consuming content and not creating content. But yeah, besides that, both phones also have a triple camera setup, which we'll dive deeper into later in the video. Now, in terms of the display, the iPhone 16 Pro Max now has a bigger 6.9-inch display, while the 9 Pro XL is at 6.8 inches. Both are OLED, but the Pixel 9 Pro has the advantage here with a much higher peak brightness at 3000 nits, while the 16 Pro Max is at a slightly lower 2000 nits, which is still very bright, but that 3000 nits on the Pixel is just ever so slightly brighter for outdoor visibility. But let's be real, sustained brightness is still different. And from my testing, the iPhone seems to be doing a much better job sustaining a brighter display outdoors compared to the Pixel 9 Pro XL. But eventually, both will dim at a much lower brightness so the phones don't overheat. Now, when it comes to battery life, the Pixel 9 Pro XL packs a massive 5060 mAh battery, which can last me a full day with an average screen on time of about 7 hours on 5G and LTE on Mint Mobile. And then there's the iPhone 16 Pro Max with a 4,685 milliamp hour battery, which can also last a full day, sometimes a full day and then some, with 25% in the morning, similar to what I was getting on the Pixel 9 Pro XL. Overall though, both can easily last a full day if you wanted to, but if you're using the cameras a ton or maybe playing a ton of games for hours on out, expect to recharge your phone midday. And speaking of charging, the Pixel 9 Pro XL can actually charge from 0 to 100% in about an hour, while the iPhone can recharge from 0 to 100% under 2 hours. So yeah, charging on the iPhone is a lot faster now, but it's still nowhere near what some flagship Android phones can do. Okay, so in terms of design and build quality, I'm a little bit torn here because this year Google flipped the script and pretty much copied or redesigned their Pixel phones to look a lot like the iPhone. And while I do love the iPhone's titanium build, I still prefer the overall look with the camera bar versus, the traditional square camera bump we've had on the iPhone since the 11 Pro. And speaking of the camera, the iPhone now has this new button called Camera Control, which I'll be honest, I really only use it to launch the camera app, and sometimes I use it as a shutter button if I'm taking landscape photos. But also, I think the rose quartz color on the Pixel 9 Pro XL looks way better than the desert titanium on the 16 Pro Max. What do you guys think? Now, if you're more of a case person, I think you guys know where this is going. Channel sponsor Dbrand has you covered on two fronts. Their grip case with their brand new Area 51 skins, which has this really nice grippy 3D texture pattern on the skins, but also on the case. And for the 16 Pro Max specifically, there's a proper cutout for the iPhone 16's camera control button, which makes using the new button a lot easier in my opinion. Now, they also have their all-new Prism 2.0 glass screen protector that's pretty much foolproof and makes the installation process so much easier than in years past. Just look at how easy this thing is putting the new screen protector on the new Pixel 9 Pro XL. Now, if you want to pick up your own set of Area 51 skins or grip case or their brand new Prism 2.0 screen protectors, go to dbrand.com/HeyMarkL or click the first link down below. Okay, so it's time for the camera comparison. This is probably what you've been waiting on in this video, but just like I said in my Pixel 9 Pro XL review, I do think that Pixel phones, especially the 9 series, take some of the best photos on a smartphone, while iPhones, the 16 Pro Max in this case, takes the best videos on any smartphone. And if you do want a more in-depth look at some of the new features on the camera front for both of these devices individually, I'll leave a link to their videos down below. So what I love about these two phones is the fact that they pretty much have identical focal lengths. So comparing these two phones are pretty easy, and it's ultimately up to you and what kind of photos you prefer. So from the photos that I've shot, the Pixel definitely looks more lifelike and very similar to what I see in person, and it looks more of a ready to upload, no edits type of photo, if that makes any sense. It just has the right amount of contrast, it has good saturation levels, and the final image just looks pleasing out of the camera. But new this year for the iPhone though is their second generation photographic styles, which are kind of like Fujifilm recipes or filters that gives you more granular controls out of your images. So if you think that the Pixel has more of a contrasty shot with just the right amount of saturation, I can actually set my photographic style to standard, but bring down the tone and add some color to it, and I can get a similar looking shot with the iPhone. I can also choose from a few different styles that can give my iPhone shots a different look without having to use a third-party app. But to Google's credit though, I love that all three focal lengths are high resolution cameras, so if I ever want to shoot in a higher resolution using the 5x zoom camera, I'm not just limited to the main camera and ultra wide camera with that 48 or 50 megapixel sensor. The 5x zoom lens is also a 48 megapixel camera, so I can crop in more on the Pixel compared to the iPhone without, the image getting destroyed. But when it comes to videos though, I really do believe that iPhones just do it better, especially with the new 4K 120 ProRes log feature on the 16 Pro series. ProRes log just takes mobile filmmaking to another level, and the fact that I can connect an external SSD on my iPhone and have my clips ready on an external drive to edit off of is really nice. Plus, the video quality is so much nicer than any normal videos on any smartphone. There's more detail, it's less process, I can color grade my footage. Plus, they added studio quality mics on the new 16 Pro series, so you can really isolate the voice in front of the camera so you don't have to use an external mic if you don't want to. I just feel like videos, shot on any Android phones, whether, it's the Pixel 9 Pro or another flagship, dips in frame rates every now and then and just looks like it's shot on a smartphone. The iPhone, in my opinion, just looks so much more natural and can pass as a real mirrorless camera. So yeah, When it comes to videos, iPhone is king, and when it comes to photos, I still think Pixels looks great out of the camera and is a lot easier to snap and upload right away. And yeah, that's about it for these two phones. The Pixel 9 Pro XL starts at $1099 for 128 gigs, while the 16 Pro Max starts at $1199 for 256 gigs. Now, the real kicker here are the discounts on Pixel phones. More often than not, months after its release, Pixel phones over the past few years almost always goes on sale that can save you a few $100s. iPhones rarely go on sale, so expect to pay retail pricing on here. Now with RCS on iPhones with iOS 18, you don't really have to worry too much about, the blue versus green bubble thing anymore. But if you don't really care about that, then hopefully this video will help you narrow down your decision on what phone you should pick up. Ultimately, both phones are really good, and whether you pick up the 16 Pro Max or the Pixel 9 Pro XL, you're still going to enjoy using either one. If you're not a heavy gamer or do a ton of heavy intensive tasks on your phone, but you love to shoot a ton of photos, then maybe go for the Pixel 9 Pro XL. But if you want the best of the best performance, the ability to play some games, high fidelity games, and film really beautiful looking videos on your phone, then I highly recommend the iPhone 16 Pro Max.